Have you ever bought a quilt pattern, got home, read it, and asked yourself, what was I thinking? And looked at it again and said, I know it's beautiful, but what am I going to do with this? How am I going to make it? How will I make this work? Well, this is that for me, and I am anxious to show you this quilt. You may have seen the color dive quilt, and I saw this hanging at a quilt show some months ago and fell in love with it. I bought a bunch of fabrics that I could mix in with my scraps that I already had, and I was good to go. And then I started reading the directions, and there was a lot of warm and cool and adjusting colors, this and that, and I decided, nope, I'm going completely scrappy. I was a bit nervous, but I love how it turned out. Remember, we don't always have to follow somebody else's guidelines. We can create our own and come up with some fantastic ideas. So let me show you how I made this. I'm even going to show you how I created my own little checklist. So as I'm making it, I can check off each little block as I go, because you can see the pattern is half square triangles and they need to be in the right place. And do you know there are over 200 different fabrics in this quilt? Oh my gosh, I love it. Let me show you. Here's a quick view of the finished quilt top with all those glorious colors. They look beautiful. I love how this pattern went together and the layout and how those angular chevron stripes just look so beautiful in this quilt. I love it. I can't wait to show you a few tips on how I made this quilt. It might make it just a little bit easier for you. And here's the beginning of my new quilt adventure. And this is the color dive quilt. I picked this pattern up when I was at QuiltCon, and it's about a 10-year-old pattern, but the quilt that was hanging was just so stunning. I really wanted to make it. And I like the way that the colors layer in a chevron pattern, and they're just stacked, and I just think that's a fun way to use a lot of different fabrics. So this is a scrappy quilt, scrappy all the way. And there's a couple things I want to show you about this. First thing, notice about the pattern. In order to get this chevron design, notice that there are half square triangles that create the diagonal pattern. So we need to have half square triangles in each combination of colors in order to get that pattern in there. That's the first thing. Then we need to have our solid squares, or I should say our untouched squares, and stagger them in here and fill that up as well. So this is pieced together row by row. There's no special like 4-patch, 9-patch, anything like that. But you do need to really pay close attention to this half square triangle layout. So the first thing I did is I pulled a bunch of fabrics together. I need a total of 80 half square triangles. And I counted out, according to the size I'm going to make, how many purple and pinks, and how many pinks and golds and blue, and etc., all that. So in doing that, I know exactly what I needed, and it works out to be 80 half square triangles. Now, what's important to me is that I don't duplicate them. So when you create a half square triangle, and this is the way I'm doing it, with a 5.5-inch square, you draw a line, you cut it, and then you get 2 half square triangles that are the same. I don't want any that are the same. So I could get away with 40 pairs to make my 80 half square triangles, but I wanted them to each be different. So I went ahead and made 80 half square triangles. So I needed a total of that many fabrics, so it's basically 160 fabrics in order to do this for one and a half square triangle each. And this has been a lot of cutting because everything I cut is a single piece. This is definitely scrappy. I went through my pile. I've got everything that I could find that was a size that I could cut down. And what I didn't use, I cut into charm squares because I'm going to use charm squares in here. So this quilt needs a total of 320-ish blocks. There's going to be at least over 250 different fabrics. How amazing is that? I can't even count. So what I want to show you first is for example, this group, I'm doing my half square triangles by color combination. That's going to keep me straight as I'm piecing, so I know where these go. And I've got my little tag on here so I know what I'm doing. In order to do that, though, I need to get my fabrics laid out. So this is a group of blues and green half square triangles. And you wonder, if everything's a different pattern, how do you begin to choose which ones to combine? Because you notice in the pattern, it's really important to get contrast. So I figured what I would do is go ahead and put my fabrics in each color group from light to dark. And then down here, I'm going to go from light to dark, more or less. And we'll just kind of line these up. I kind of move these around. And so what I'm going to do is just put these together into pairs. And this is going to help me to get a good contrast, mix up my fabrics, and put them together in a way that works really well. As I'm going along, I'm also looking at the patterns, the density of the pattern, the repetition, the color. I don't want things to be too conflicting or not contrasting, too busy. For example, I wouldn't want those two together just because it's too much, but I think this would work out well. So we'll go ahead and put that together just because I like the way it looks. And so for this light blue, I probably get a little more carried away than necessary, but it's just kind of the nature of how I do this. And so I'm going to put these two together. One thing to keep in mind when you're doing this is as you're sewing, make sure that your blocks are right side together. I'm combining batiks with regular fabrics, and I do need to be careful with that because the batiks are basically reversible. I'm going to hold that aside. And the regular fabrics, you've got to do it on the correct side. But I'm going to show you how with the half square triangle we'll mark them, and we'll make sure we'll mark them on the correct side. So I'm looking for something that's a bit sort of solid. Here we go. Like here's a light one. Now, granted, they're both light colors, but that's a good contrast. So when that's in the quilt, you're definitely going to see the difference between the blue and the green. And so that one works. And I'm just going to go through. There's some awful busy prints here. And I just want to work through and see what I can find. So here, this one, I'll put this here with that. And so it's just a matter of going through all the pieces. I like those together. I just thought that was a pretty print. There's some real, this is everything. This is everything I have. All the different fabrics that I've gathered over time I have here. And I think, you know, a lot of them just look really wonderful and fun. Now these two go together, kind of graphic. I think that'll be good. And so I'm just piling these up. So when I go to sew, I'm ready to put them together. Now, when I get my pairs together, the first thing I'm going to do is mark a line on the back of whichever side is going to be more visible. And sometimes it can be hard. Okay, this one would probably be it. And I'd put my pencil from here to here. And then when I do that, I have a nice diagonal line drawn from one corner to the other, and then I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch down each side. Now, these blocks are cut at 5½ inches. With the 1/4 inch seam diagonally, I want to finish with a 5-inch half square triangle. And once this is done, and I have all of them sewn, and I chain piece them. So I put these together in pairs the way I want to sew them, and then I sew down one side of the triangle on all the blocks. There happen to be 18 pairs here, and then I go ahead, flip it around, and go the other way. And that works out really well because it goes faster. The first side actually takes a bit longer, but that second side, boom, everything is sewn. All you have to do is follow the line, and you're good to go. I am making 2 of everything, but I only need 1. So I'm setting these aside. So I'm going to have 80 5-inch half square triangles when I'm finished. Does that sound like another quilt idea or what? So we're going to put that aside for now, and I'm going to decide which side I want my seam to go and be consistent, and I mean by color. So the greens tend to be the darker color, or actually those are blues, aren't they? We have blues and, nope, it's green. It's green and the gold and yellow colors. So I want the green to have the seam pressed towards it like this. Now, when we've got our half square triangle, we want to make sure that we have it trimmed to the right side. Once we've made our half square triangle and we've pressed our seam to the correct side, what we now need to do is trim this. And what I do is use my 5-inch square. Actually, it's a 6-inch square. You can use your regular rulers with the 45, but I just find the squares so much easier. It's visually, I think, simpler to follow, and size-wise, it's easier to manage. Now, a couple things you want to look at in your corners. You want to make sure that your seam comes right at the point in the corner. And I have a couple here that were a bit wonky. I think this one was okay, but there were a couple here. And okay, so for example, this one, this really isn't much of anything, but it has the zigzag, so you're not real sure where that corner is. So what I would do is I would measure from this corner and trim over here. What I find is when you have good square triangles, good square half square triangles, you generally only need to trim on 2 sides. You line your block up, or your ruler up here, and you put it on the 5-inch mark, and then you just trim these edges and you're good to go. So that works out really well. But let me show you, there were a couple things here. Okay, here for example, do you see how this does not come all the way to the edge? You want to make sure that this gets trimmed so that that corner is perfect. We don't want that extra fabric. And while it doesn't look like much, it will make a difference when you're sewing the blocks together, because that will affect your seam allowance and how this lines up. And you'll notice lining these up is pretty important as we go through the chevron, or the diagonal design that we're doing here. Now, this was the one I wanted to show you. When you're pressing and you have your half square triangles, here we go, and you open one up, and we're going to press it to this side here. We want to make sure that we don't press from corner to corner, because that's going to stretch our fabric on the bias. So we want to press it straight in line with the edges, and we're going to press it up and over. Now, what happened here on this one, I did not press it well, and you can see here how this fabric is folded beyond where the seam allowance is. This should be completely open, and you see that little tuck right there? I need to make sure I repress this. So as you're pressing your half square triangles, you want to make sure those little problems are taken care of, because they will come back to haunt you later on as you're trying to get everything to fit and it's not quite going together. So this is where we are, and I have my 80 half square triangles, well, less the 18 I need to put together, but I did want to show you how that goes together. And then the next challenge is going to be going through all these charm squares that have been cut. I swear I've been cutting for days, and I have another basket load. So if you're cutting one row, you might as well cut 2. And if you have 4 different fabrics, cut them all together. So I probably, I don't even know how many there are here, a ton. And so this is what I'm going to use in the quilt. And I'm just going to divide them by color, because each group here is going to need a certain number of that particular color, and I'll just grab them out of my pile and stage them, and then I'm going to go ahead and sew it. So this is really a lot of fun. I'm anxious to see how it comes together. There is a link down below where you can find this pattern. Right now, it's on sale at two places. At the quilt shop, I bought it from, it's called the Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T Fabrics, and they were at QuiltCon. So they were in a booth, and I bought it from them. I'm not even sure where they're located, but they have the pattern on sale for $12. I did find a discounted price on Etsy, and I have that listed below. And I think it's like $11, so that saves a little. But those are the only two places I find that you can get this fabric, or excuse me, get this pattern. But, you know, you may or may not want to do it, but I really love the way this works. I like the half square triangles, and the contrast is great. So let me go ahead and finish getting all these pieces together, and I'll start assembling the quilt and show you what this will look like. I wasn't quite sure in the beginning how I was going to sew this together, stage the fabric, piece it correctly, and get the pattern that I want. Because there's not a lot of repetition of fabrics and there's a lot going on, it was making me a little uneasy that I would know where to put everything and that I would remember the pattern. So I did a couple things. I individualized, I had individual piles for each fabric and or combination. So these are just the pinks, then the pink and the purple, then the purple and the yellow, the yellow and the green, and then the blue and the green, the blue and the pink and the purple. And in between here, I use these extra pinks. So this worked out really well, and what I'm doing is staging this on the ironing board next to where I'm working, sort of in a row. So I start at one end and I work through. That has really helped me to make sure I'm getting the right fabrics in the right place. The other thing that I did is I went through my bundles. Like some of these, there were anywhere from, say, 45 to 55 fabrics in each color group. And so I had lots of them, from lights to darks to varying shades, and, you know, yellow to gold to orange to a bit of a rusty orange. So what I did is I'd take one color and I'd group it into three groups: dark, medium, and light. And then I put my pile together with one of each. So I would take a dark one and then a light one, or excuse me, what did I do? I went dark, medium, and light, dark, medium, and light. And I just put them all in that order. That way, I didn't have to worry that I was going to get duplicates or too much of the same, or that one side of the quilt will be yellow and the other side will be more of a tannish gold. So that worked out really well for me. Now, let me show you how the quilt's looking. I have the quilt about halfway put together, and it's 18 by 18 blocks, and I have the full 18 length, and I have the 10 rows wide. So that means there's 8 more to go. And I just wanted to double check. I'm going to stop at this halfway point, and let me just show you a bit how this is coming together. And I'm really glad that I can see the diagonal. It's like, yes, okay, I'm doing this correct. And just kind of pull this here. I think I can do this. So you can see how these lines move across the whole quilt like this. And then we move up into some other colors. And once I did the first 2 rows, I got it. I was really concerned because I just was not sure how this was all going to go together. But I want to show you the trick I used that really helped. But I just also want you to see all these different fabrics. I can't wait to see what it looks like all together. I hope it's not something that, you know, gives us a headache to look at. But there's some great fabrics. There's some funky fabrics, but that's okay. And we'll just kind of put them all out there and see what we get. So it's coming together well. Let me show you what I did. You know, I've shown you my online graph paper. I'll go online, I'll find a piece that's free, and I'll print it. Now what I did is I used the pattern, and it had a grid of how the blocks laid out. And it's just like this. It's no different than this. And if you were to make a copy of this very lightly on a grayscale, then you could actually have your graph paper with grayed areas so you could identify the colors. But I went ahead and I did it just on a piece of blank graph paper because I needed to get this straight in my head. There was something about this that I wasn't sure how the transitions were going to be made, but it worked out really well. So I drew out how many blocks, and then I put in my colors, and I numbered them so I knew how many blocks of each of the half square triangles I was going to need, how many of the full 5-inch blocks. And so that way I had everything as I was quilting, so I knew I would have enough. And I did make a couple extra in the various bundles in case I thought, oh, maybe I need this color or that. So when I get to the end, there's a few extra to choose from. And then I used my trusty pen, and I started out by checking off as I went through because I was afraid that if I stopped and stepped away, coming back and finding my place might be difficult. And I think it definitely would be. So this has worked out really well. So I've come this far. I've gone down to the point, and I'm starting up on the other side. And you can see that. Let's see. Where are some of the points? Is it this way? Oh my goodness, I can't even find my way in this quilt. Let's see. That's the purple. So it's got to be in here. Okay, I promise I'll show you. Easier said than done. So do these come together? It's amazing. This quilt is so much bigger than I thought it would be. Here we go. Okay, here we go. Points. We're finding them. All right. So here's my gold point right there. So I had my gold fabrics coming this way, and it's going to lead down. So we have points, and then we have some blocks, and then we move into the next point. And that, I made a mistake. Can you see that? I think I made a mistake. I have to figure out what I did here because something, no, I guess not. There it is. There's the point. Okay, I was off one row. See what I mean? If I didn't have that diagram, I think I would have gone a bit crazy. But this has worked out really well. I've got points, I have diagonals, my colors are pretty much lining up, and I'm more than halfway finished. Another reason I stop now is I want to press these seams. The reason I like to assemble my quilt in like a 4-patch or a 9-patch is it's easy to press. I can press those small blocks, put the big quilt together, and then the pressing on the back is less. It's minimal. It's not like pressing row by row. Whereas something like this, it's assembled piece individually, is each sewn. You have to go back and trying to press an entire quilt top in one fell swoop without any pre-pressing in advance of smaller areas, I find to be really frustrating because I'll be ironing this way and then I'll go this way and the seams kick up and they go the wrong direction, and I would just rather pre-press this half so it's done, and then when I'm finished with the rest of the quilt, I only have to press that half. It's more manageable and it's less cumbersome to try and handle. So however you do it, that's great, but that's what works for me. And once I get this pressed, I'll finish the rest of them. And it's coming really fast. I was surprised once I started quilting how quickly these all came together. So this has been a challenge, but it's a lot of fun. And I'm liking this quilt. I think it's going to be a winner. I can't wait to see it when it's all put together. Here are some close-up views of the quilt top, and you can see all the variety of fabrics. They just work terrific together, and the key, of course, are these half-square triangles that separate the colors, and those are made from the larger squares where everything else is a 5-inch square. I love how it turned out. It's beautiful. Here's a view of the bottom corner. So we have the chevrons that come all the way down, and then the colors start repeating down here from the top. So it's just a really fun, colorful quilt. And here's a picture of the center of the quilt. Just the way these chevrons line up. I'm really pleased with how these half-square triangles turned out. I think they look beautiful. Here's another look at the entire quilt top. I think it came out lovely. I'm really, really happy with this quilt. I hope you enjoyed the video and consider doing a quilt like this, or maybe coming up with your own half square triangle pattern. It's a lot of fun and it can create some incredibly dynamic designs. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a wonderful day.